The Bangtan Universe is a complex, mysterious story that runs through much of BTS's work, from their debut-era trilogy all the way to the present. It's fascinated ARMY for years, but if you're new to the BU, we're here to get you up to speed in a two-part summary that will walk you through the whole story from the school trilogy through HYYH The Notes, Book 2, and the Bangtan Universe game. Just be warned, we're about to give you a ton of spoilers, so if you'd rather find things out on your own, stop the video now and visit the links in our description below. Now, before we begin our deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you won't miss out on our newest content. We'll be updating the channel regularly with short videos and deep dives into BU material. Now let's get started. The BU began in music videos, with BTS playing the main characters in what were clearly chapters in a single story. From there, the BU expanded into books, graphic lyrics, webtoons, and even more. We'll make use of all these sources as we break down the story for you. The BU tells the story of 7 young men with tragic pasts and uncertain fates. But one character, Seokjin, has a secret. He can travel in time, and he's been reliving the same few months over and over for who knows how long, trying to save his friends from terrible fates. The moment he succeeds with one friend or overcomes one obstacle, something else trips him up. In the end, the price he pays to time travel could end up costing everyone everything. Now this is what we know about the BU so far. The story begins in a small town called Songju on March 2nd in Kim Seokjin's senior year of high school. 7 students arrive late to the school and are forced to clean out an old storage room as punishment. But fate has something more in store for these boys than just sorting junk. The storage room becomes a sort of magic shop where each boy finds what he needs the most: music, dance, healing, mentoring, and most of all, friendship. The place they were meant to hate becomes their hideout, and when they're together, the 7 feel bulletproof. They can have fun in their hideout, or ditch school and run wild in the streets. They can even be hoodlums at times, but they don't care about anything except being together. They can laugh when they're together. When they're alone, though, the boys are overwhelmed by private traumas. When one of them looks into a mirror alone, he sees himself as broken, helpless, and hopeless. In fact, for some of the bulletproof boys, friendship is all that stands between them and total despair. One fateful day, Seokjin drives his friends to the beach, where they look for a rock that supposedly makes dreams come true. When they find out it's been demolished, they just shout their dreams to the sea. Some of them don't even have dreams, but they still shout. Then they commemorate the experience with a group picture at the edge of the sea. This photo becomes critical to the later BU. Now that was the most beautiful moment of the boys' lives. Afterwards, nothing is quite the same, and in year 20, the group slowly drifts apart. Seokjin leaves Sanju at his father's decree, but not before facing the consequences of a second secret he holds. His father and the principal have been forcing him to spy on his friends, whom they apparently see as undesirables. Seokjin hates what he's doing, but he learned long ago not to defy his father. 11 years earlier, he had tried to protect a friend when a pair of goons stormed their classroom and tried to abduct the boy, who's only referred to as Mr. Chui's son. Seokjin helped the boy escape and even hid him in his own bedroom. But when Seokjin's father got home, he had the goons with him and physically forced Seokjin to let the boy get taken. That taught Seokjin what it meant to be a good boy in his father's eyes, obeying at all costs. So in high school, he spied on his friends. Looking back at BTS's earliest MVs and VCRs, you can find hidden signals of what he's doing. An earpiece here, a red pill there. For now, all you need to know is that Seokjin tries to protect his friends from punishment. But on one occasion, Namjoon and Taehyung hear him telling the principal something about Yoongi. When Seokjin realizes they heard him, Namjoon reassures him that it doesn't matter, and Taehyung drops the issue because he decides Namjoon must be right. But later, Seokjin points a teacher toward the storage room without realizing that Yoongi and Jungkook are inside. The teacher beats Jungkook, Yoongi shoves the teacher aside, and Yoongi is expelled. Then Seokjin's father sends him to the United States. But before he leaves, Seokjin goes back to the storage room one last time, and he finds something really interesting. The walls are covered with students' graffiti dating back for years, and Seokjin finds his own father's name on the wall, along with the names of several other boys. Underneath them are the words, "Everything started from here." Yoongi's expulsion sends him into a deep depression. He's always been afraid to get close to anyone, and he's always had a love-hate relationship with music, so being kicked out of school just worsens these issues. They stem from the fact that Yoongi learned to play the piano, which he loves, from his mother, who was a tyrant. She later committed suicide by burning down the house and intentionally dying in the fire. All Yoongi could salvage was a single burnt piano key. Now, playing music for his friends helped him rediscover his love for music, and he was teaching Jungkook to play the piano as well. But he'd been playing that piano for Jungkook when the teacher found them, so now Yoongi feels like, in a way, his music caused his expulsion. He throws away the burnt piano key he'd saved, distances himself from his friends, and starts drinking nonstop to dull the pain. The person most affected by Yoongi's withdrawal is Jungkook, because Yoongi was both his mentor and his favorite kyung. But all the boys are family to Jungkook because his home life is a wreck. His father abandoned him and his mother probably years ago, and he probably killed himself too. Then his mother remarried, and now she wants nothing to do with Jungkook. Meanwhile, his stepfather and stepbrother alternate between ignoring him and outright abusing him. Jungkook blames himself for the whole situation, and he self-harms to cope. As you can guess, he blames himself for Yoongi's expulsion too. Namjoon leaves town because his family is poor, his father is ill, and since his brother is totally unreliable, Namjoon has to support his whole family alone. His personal mantra is, "You must survive," because he doesn't think he can manage anything more than surviving. In year 20, he and his family move to a small village where he takes a job as a delivery driver, navigating snowy mountain roads. There, a freak accident breaks the last of his spirit, and at his father's urging, he abandons his family and returns to Songju. Now he works as a gas station attendant and lives in an abandoned railroad container. Hosik seems like the happiest member of the group. He grew up in an orphanage after being abandoned by his mother as a child, but now he's moved into an apartment of his own. He also has a job at a burger joint, which he seems to enjoy. But Hosik has a secret too. He tells his friends he has narcolepsy, and he does pass out sometimes, but not for the reason they think. Hosik's mother abandoned him at an amusement park when he was a kid. She told him to close his eyes and count to 10, and when he opened his eyes again, she was gone, and he was left with nothing but a candy bar. Now he uses sweets to comfort himself, and he's developed Munchausen syndrome, a psychiatric condition that causes sufferers to fake or even cause illnesses and injuries to themselves just to get attention from others. His fainting spells are real, but they're actually triggered by anything that reminds him too strongly of his mother. Jimin has psychiatric issues too, and he's been in and out of hospitals since childhood. Now, Army didn't find out the cause of Jimin's issues until the most recent BU updates, so we'll keep it a secret here too until we reach that part of our summary. For now, it's enough to know that when Jimin was a child, he had a traumatic experience at the Grass Flower Arboretum, and it left him with periodic seizures and a fear of water. For many years, he repressed the memory of what happened, and his social climbing parents shuffled him in and out of psychiatric wards to hide him from the public. But things changed in year 20 when his memories returned after a seizure at a bus stop. HYYYH was with him at the time, and he took him to the emergency room. And that was the last HYYYH or any of his friends saw of him. By the time Seokjin returns in year 22, Jimin has been in the hospital for 2 years straight, and he's lost hope of ever being free again. And that's not the end of his issues. Jimin is so horrified by the memories that returned that he wants to forget them all over again, but he can't, and the doctors don't seem to care either way. So he lies and says he doesn't remember. But since Jimin always prided himself on being a good kid, this is the first lie he's ever told to an adult. Now he feels like a bad kid, and that sickens him almost as much as what happened at the Arboretum. Last but not least is Taeyoung. His father is an alcoholic who beats Taeyoung and his sister on a regular basis. The children's mother left them years ago, presumably to get away from the abuse. Taeyoung resents her for that, and he also resents having to take care of his father, whom he loves and hates at the same time. In a way, he's like Namjoon, carrying the responsibilities of an adult without feeling like an adult. Taeyoung vents his anger, fear, and other emotions in graffiti, and he's often arrested for it, but he doesn't mind because he'd rather spend the night in jail than at home. April 11th, year 22. Seokjin returns to Songju from the United States, and since 2 years have passed, he's completely lost track of his friends. Driving through town, he passes his old school and sees Jungkook at the gate. This causes him to reminisce about his high school years. That evening, he stops at a gas station and sees Namjoon working at a nearby pump, but Seokjin drives off without saying hello. Time passes, and on May 21st, he dreams that all his friends are drowning while he tries and fails to save them. When he wakes up the next day, he decides to look up his friends after all. He starts at the gas station, but finds out that Namjoon beat up a customer just the night before, and now he's in jail. There's also a TV in the background of this scene showing a news report about a high school student who killed his father, but Seokjin barely notices that. He just rushes to the jail. Speaking through a window in a visitation booth, Namjoon tells him that the customer he attacked had mocked him for being poor and thrown his payment on the ground. Namjoon was too proud to pick it up, and when the man kept antagonizing him, he finally snapped. The customer offered to settle the case, but Namjoon can't settle because he doesn't have the money, so he just refused without saying anything more. There's no telling now how long he's going to rot in jail. Before Seokjin leaves, Namjoon gives him an update on some of their old friends. Jungkook and Yoongi are dead, and HYYYH has been hospitalized after an accident. Namjoon doesn't know anything at all about Jimin and Taehyung. But Seokjin finds out about Taehyung as soon as he leaves the detention center. News reporters are swarming around a new inmate, a high school student who killed his father, and Seokjin recognizes the boy immediately. It's Taehyung. That evening, Seokjin goes alone to the beach, the site of the most beautiful moment in his life, and he wonders where it all went wrong for everybody. In a dreamlike state, he encounters a cat with one blue eye and one green eye, and it offers him a bargain to save them all. The next morning, Seokjin wakes up from the apparent dream, and his whole world instantly shatters like a broken mirror. Then he wakes up again immediately. The date on his cell phone is April 11th, but he has no memory of living this day before. He drives around town again, sees Jungkook and Namjoon again, and decides not to approach them again. But later that night, he comes to a screeching halt when a body drops onto his truck from above. It's Jungkook, and he's very, very dead. Again the mirror shatters, and again Seokjin wakes up on April 11th. He's anxious all day and feels a sense of déjà vu, but he still doesn't realize he's repeating the same day. Then the next morning comes and everything changes. A new voice speaks to him while it's still on the border of dreams. You can tell it's a new voice and not the cat by comparing their speech bubbles. See? The second voice shows him that he's been traveling in time and teaches him how to remember the loops. But notice that the voice doesn't tell him how to stop the loops. Apparently it's too late for that. Now here's a question for you. What is the cat really? And who or what is the second voice? We may answer that later. Anyway, Seokjin is determined to save his friends, but it turns out to be more difficult than he thought. He tries stopping Namjoon from fighting with the customer, and that's fairly easy. But taking Namjoon along as he tries to save Jungkook gets complicated, and Jungkook is easier to save than some of his other friends. Yoongi's death, for instance, is hard to predict. He kills himself like his mother did, dying in a fire, but Yoongi rents a hotel room and sets that on fire. Then he tosses his sheet music on the floor and waits to die. But he chooses different dates and different hotels for his suicide, which means Seokjin has trouble finding and stopping him. As for Hosik, his accident turns out to be two accidents. First, he faints on a bridge and sustains a mild concussion, but while he's in the hospital overnight, he falls down a flight of stairs and breaks his leg so badly that he can never dance again. The leg injury drives Hosik to despair, since dancing has been his favorite activity since childhood. It takes a few loops for Seokjin to learn about Hosik's second accident, and by that time he's also found out that Jimin is in the hospital. But getting him out leads to one tragedy after another. Even if he tries to convince Jimin's mother to release him, she refuses and chews Jimin out so badly that after she leaves, he drowns himself in the hospital bathtub. On the other hand, if Seokjin tries to break Jimin free, or uses one or two of their friends to help convince him to escape, Jimin again feels overwhelmed and drowns himself. As for Taehyung, he always kills his abusive father on May the 20th, no matter what Seokjin does. In fact, on at least 2 occasions, Seokjin tried to stop him and Taehyung accidentally killed him. But even when Seokjin dies, his world resets with a shatter of glass, and he returns to the same date, the same set of circumstances, and the same fear that he'll never be able to save his friends. Interestingly, another of the 7 boys is experiencing some of the same horrors as Seokjin. Taehyung has dreams of Yoongi dying in a fire, Jungkook falling to his death, Jimin drowning, and all the rest. The first person Taehyung tries to tell is Namjoon, since Namjoon is his favorite Hyung, but Namjoon doesn't know what to tell him. In another of Seokjin's time loops, which is unfortunately cut short by a car crash, Taehyung knows where to find Yoongi because he saw that in a dream. And one April 11th, after Seokjin reaches his breaking point and stops even trying to help his friends, Taehyung shows up on his doorstep, saying he dreamed that Seokjin was home and he came by to see if it was true. That particular moment gives Seokjin the hope to open his door again and visit the world. Eventually Seokjin realizes something that the second voice already told him, though he seems to have forgotten. It said, "You won't make it out here alone in this entangled destiny." In other words, Seokjin and his friends are bound to each other by fate, and they have to save each other. But only he can put them in the right places to let them do that. By now, Seokjin has learned the reasons why they make such drastic decisions. For instance, Namjoon isn't a violent person, but he's always felt a mixture of resentment and pride about his poverty, and on the night he attacked that customer, he was already stressed out about new hospital bills related to his father's illness. Even though Namjoon had returned to Songju, he's still the family's breadwinner. He's just making more money in the city. And since his father's recent surgery, he's taken on several part-time jobs at once. But Seokjin can save Namjoon fairly easily just by picking up the money from the ground and handing it straight to him. That short-circuits the customer's attempt to antagonize and humiliate him. Meanwhile, Yoongi and Jungkook turn out to be the keys to saving each other. They're both seeking some reason to cling to life, and they were best friends until Yoongi began isolating himself. If Seokjin can get Yoongi to call Jungkook at just the right moment, that will stop Jungkook from jumping. Then the two can become friends again, and when Yoongi tries to kill himself, Jungkook will find him and drag him out of the fire. Hosik and Jimin are also the keys to saving each other. Both of Hosik's accidents are caused by memories of his mother who abandoned him. When he fainted on the bridge, it was because he'd recently found out that his favorite auntie at the orphanage had cancer, and he was afraid she'd abandon him just like his mother, only by dying. Then in the hospital, he fell in the stairwell because he was running after a woman he thought was his mother. But as Seokjin finds out, Jimin is in the surgery ward at the same time rather than in the psychiatric ward. This is because another patient in the psych ward attacked Jimin, so he needs therapy for his wrist. All Seokjin has to do then is arrange for Jimin to be in the stairwell when Hosik falls. Jimin will catch him, and Hosik will learn about Jimin's fate and say, "Let's get out of here." Then, most importantly, Hosik will stage an escape that involves all their friends. Jimin needed to have a whole gang behind him to muster the courage to disobey his mother. In fact, Jimin will carry this courage out into the world with him and use it to go home and face his mother again, and his father. They're utterly cold to him, but the important thing is that he faced them regardless and reclaimed his place in the home. Once Seokjin solves these problems, it seems like his mission is finished. He invites his friends to go back to the beach with him on May 22nd, and again he drives them to the spot where the Dream Rock used to be. Now there's a platform in its place, overlooking the sea. But Seokjin has been so busy figuring out how to save Namjoon, Yoongi, Jungkook, Hosik, and Jimin that he totally forgot Taehyung has already killed his father in this loop. Remember, it already happens on May 20th, and he gets arrested on the 22nd. He just hasn't been arrested in this loop because he's at the beach instead of in Songju on the 22nd. But it doesn't matter in the end because Taehyung can't live with his crime. As his friends watch, with no clue of his intentions, he climbs the platform, runs to the end, and throws himself into the sea. The mirror breaks and the loop resets. It might seem that since Yoongi and Jungkook are the keys to saving each other, and Hosik and Jimin are the keys to saving each other, then Namjoon could be the key to saving Taehyung. But this isn't the case. Namjoon is already overwhelmed by his responsibilities to his family, and he doesn't feel like a real adult anyway. He can't save Taehyung. He can't even answer his phone call in the loops where Taehyung calls him right after the murder. As for Seokjin, he's already proved he can't save Taehyung because whenever he tries, he gets killed. But almost by accident, he discovers that another of his friends is the perfect person to do the job. Hosik has been quietly encouraging Taehyung and providing for his needs for who knows how long. Through a complicated series of steps, Seokjin can put Hosik on Taehyung's doorstep at just the right moment to grab him before he kills his father. Then the father runs out of the apartment and Taehyung only suffers some cuts to his hands from the broken glass. And unlike Seokjin, who tried the same move, Hosik can do it without being harmed at all. Finally, everyone is safe. Really safe. Seokjin takes him to the beach again, and this time he climbs the platform, where he throws his ever-present camcorder into the sea. He's had enough of observing his friends from afar and staging scenes they don't know are staged. He's going to tell them all the truth, and after that, he can just hang out with them and be friends again. He's already rented a cottage where they can stay for the night, and the boys walk through a pine forest to reach it. But behind Seokjin, unnoticed, Taehyung is simmering. A few days earlier in this loop, Taehyung told Seokjin about the dreams he was having because he wasn't sure whether they were actually visions or just dreams, and he sensed that Seokjin could explain everything. But Seokjin said he didn't know anything. It wasn't completely a lie. I didn't know why Taehyung had been having such a dream, but I did know how brutal it was. That's why I couldn't tell him the truth, all because I knew what he was wondering about. He didn't need to know more, that it wasn't a dream, him killing his father. It happened in real life, repetitively. No one should go through life with such agony. I wouldn't take my decision back even if it hurt our friendship. But this isn't Taeyoung's only reason for being upset. He's also thinking about his father's constant abuse and the murder he dreamed of committing over and over. He's scared that he might have inherited his father's violence. And there's one more thing. As the group walks through the forest, Namjoon steps aside to take a call from his mother, and Taeyoung hangs back to listen. He's only a year younger than I am. No, I didn't say so. I'm older, I know, but he's not a kid anymore. It's time he started taking care of himself. I got it. No, I'm not mad. Sorry. In actuality, Namjoon's mother is asking for help in dealing with his irresponsible brother. But Taeyoung was already upset about his dreams and Seokjin's refusal to help him, and seeing the platform gave him a major case of déjà vu. So he's not in the best frame of mind to interpret one half of a phone call he knows nothing about. As a result, he assumes Namjoon is telling someone that Taeyoung needs to take care of himself. But he doesn't say anything. That evening at the cottage, Seokjin has something he needs to tell everyone. He's about to explain his time traveling, but before he can get that far, Taeyoung misunderstands him again and hits his limit. He begins to shout at Seokjin. When Namjoon tries to calm him down, Taeyoung lashes out at him too, saying they're not real brothers and there's no point in being together since they're all alone in the end. Of course, Seokjin has been trying to get them together for who knows how long, and he has also been trying to save their lives. So he finally snaps. He punches Taeyoung, the party breaks up, and the friends drift off into the night. Seokjin saved his friends from terrible fates, but he hasn't solved all their problems, and he never can. As the friends split apart at a literal crossroad, each of them begins a new journey, alone. This journey will be about learning to love themselves. On the way home from the beach, Jungkook is struck by a hit-and-run driver and nearly killed. He spends several weeks in the hospital, first in a coma and then learning how to walk again, but his doctor says it's a miracle he survived it all. Jungkook's friends would have visited him right away if they'd only known about his accident, but because of what happened at the cottage, they're all out of touch. It takes them 3 whole weeks to find out where he is. But in the meantime, Jungkook meets a girl of about his own age who's hospitalized like him. We don't know what she's doing there, we just know they become friends. In fact, all but one of the boys connects with a girl during this era, but the pairings aren't necessarily about romance, they're more about growing up. After all, this is the era called Love Yourself. The boys who connect with their girls are also connecting with a new part of themselves and learning from the experience. And since each girl is like the boy in certain ways, each boy is learning to see himself in a different way and in a different person. Just a quick note here before we continue. The Wings era is very much about growing up, life lessons, and connections of, well, many types. But since the MVs of this era are almost entirely symbolic, we need to explore Wings separately. In this summary, we'll just refer to the highlight reel and HYYH The Notes Book 1 for the story details. Let's begin by talking about Yoongi and his girl, since their connection intersects with Jungkook's. Yoongi has been avoiding his friends again, but he's taken on a music partner who gives him a different type of support. She's much more goal-oriented than he is, and she chips away at the excuses he uses to avoid making mistakes in life. For instance, she gets him to eat and sleep regularly. She replaces his cigarettes with a lollipop, and she steals his lighter, writing his initials on it and tying it to her guitar. Yoongi mostly just tinkers on the piano, but she compliments him on one particular piece he's writing. The piece he began in the high school storage room. At the same time, she's writing her own music and sharing it. She even invites him to join her in a performance at the hospital. Now, when she says this, Yoongi doesn't know Jungkook is in that hospital because Yoongi hasn't been taking his friend's calls and he's let his phone battery die. When he finally recharges his phone and does get the news, he rushes straight for the hospital where he tries and fails to visit his dearest friend. The hallway was strangely long and dark. People in patient uniforms slid by. My heart kept throbbing. Their faces were pale like sheets and expressionless. They seemed dead. I could hear my heavy breathing in my head. I could see Jungkook in his patient gown lying in the bed through the cracked door. He must be asleep, but he seemed as if he were dead. He had almost died. The doctor said it was a miracle he was alive. I turned my head. I couldn't look at him any longer. A multitude of images flashed before my eyes like a panorama. Mom's room that had been unlit, the sounds of the piano that came from the fire, Jungkook's back as he clumsily played the piano, Jungkook lying unconscious on the empty street, and the pain and fear he must have gone through as he lost consciousness. She'd said, "It's all because of you." She'd said, "If you hadn't been born." Mom's voice. Or was it mine? Or was it someone else's? I'd been tormented my whole life because of those words. I wanted to believe that they weren't true, but Jungkook was lying there. He was lying in a hospital where patients roamed around like the living dead. If I'd just ignored him, if I'd just died in the flames, would none of this have happened? My head ached. I'd lost all my confidence. I ran down the hallway, faltering and staggering, and got out of the hospital. Of course, Jungkook knows nothing about Yoongi's visit. He certainly missed Yoongi, and all his other friends have visited him except Taehyung. He also has a faint idea that he knows the car that hit him, but he brushes that aside. His girl gives him new things to think about. She encourages him to explore his artistic side, both in music and in art. And although Jungkook doesn't see Yoongi, he hears Yoongi's old piece from the storage room when Yoongi's partner plays it for the patients. In fact, he even sees Yoongi's lighter hanging from her guitar. Taehyung meets his girl when he catches her trying to shoplift from the convenience store where he works. He helps her by paying for the items, and she cautiously accepts him as a friend. Like him, she's quietly defiant, closed off but grateful, and she's interested in all the same activities as him, including graffiti and running from the police. She refuses to talk about her family, and it seems likely that she's either a runaway or homeless or both. In other words, her situation is close enough to Taehyung's for him to feel comfortable with her. And since he's disconnected from Namjoon, his Hyungyeon mentor, he's learning in a way to mentor himself. Namjoon, who loved books even in high school, has decided to spend his free time in a library, reading and learning as much as possible, in hopes of changing his life somehow. Soon he notices a girl who seems to be doing the same thing, and this isn't the first time he's seen her. He already spotted her on a bridge where she was handing out flyers, a job he's done as well. The girl looks as tired and broken down as he does, and he sympathizes with her. In fact, when they're both in the same elevator, he looks at the mirrored walls, expecting to see his own face, but he finds her staring at him instead. She drops her eyes. But remember what we said earlier in the video. The boys have difficulty looking at themselves in the mirror when they're not together. Namjoon isn't with his friends now, but he sees the girl's face instead of his own, and she drops her eyes. So he's connecting with her a little bit, and in the process he's beginning to grow up. Hosek's girl is a dancer like him, and she's his partner in a club he started called Just Dance. She's also an old friend who grew up with him in the orphanage. Like Hosek, who often brings the boys food and writes cheerful notes to Taehyung in secret, this girl is quietly supportive and caring. She reminds Hosik of his mother, and after a while he begins to think she looks like his mother. Then one day she brings him a birthday cake, even though he doesn't know when his birthday is, and he's able to close his eyes and make a wish without fainting. Jimin is also a member of Just Dance. He used to love dancing before his experience at the Arboretum, and now when he watches himself dancing in the mirror, he begins to feel like he loves himself a little more. But since Jimin has spent so much of his life trapped in hospitals, trying and failing to escape his trauma, he's experienced the least growth of any of his friends. This might be why he doesn't have a girl of his own. Instead, he connects to some degree with Hosik's girl. Jimin adores and idolizes her, and she's kind to him, encouraging and understanding him even when he makes mistakes. But she's Hosik's girl, not Jimin's. Now we've saved Seokjin and his girl for last on purpose. The highlight reel actually begins with him seeing her at a railroad crossing. But their story is the most important of this era, and what Seokjin learns from his experience with her lays out the whole process of learning to love oneself. Throughout the Bangtan Universe, Seokjin has held on to a single dream, being a good kid. Unfortunately, his idea of good is being judged as good by the people who matter to him. That's his father, his friends, and now the girl he met at the railroad crossing. He's instantly smitten with her, and when he watches her diary fall from her arms, it never occurs to him that a really good kid would give it back to her. Instead, Seokjin keeps the diary, studies it, and tries to make himself over into the man he thinks she wants. They take walks together, listening to music and sharing headphones, which is something she wrote about in her diary. They volunteer at an animal shelter, something else she wrote about. He can't arrange the temple stay she wanted, but he takes her to a lovely cafe instead. And most importantly, he finds her favorite flower. It's called a smeraldo, and it's purely a creation of the BU. You can find a whole video about it elsewhere, but this is all you need to know for now. In the language of flowers, the smeraldo represents the truth untold. Yes, just like the BTS song. In fact, they were actually hiding smeraldos in their videos from the HYYH era onward. They put them in scenes where the characters leave important truths untold. ARMY just didn't know what the flowers meant until the highlight reel came out. But back to Seokjin. After much searching, he finds a local flower shop that sells smeraldos, and he orders a bouquet which he plans to give the girl at the annual fireworks festival on August 30th. He also plans to profess his love to her on that day. Now the problem is that none of the girls stay with the boys, and each boy's heart breaks at least a little when his girl disappears. They all leave in different ways. Yoongi's failure at the hospital drives him deeper into depression and drink. The last we see of his girl is her trying to calm him down as he staggers across the street. He throws her off and continues alone. But while she was with him, she brought music back into his life, and that will be critically important later on. Before Jungkook is discharged, he gathers a handful of flowers and brings them to his girl's room, only to find that the room has been emptied, her bed has been remade, and the girl herself is gone. Jungkook never finds out what happened to her, and he never sees her again. Still, she helped him connect with his creative spirit before she left. Taeyoung loses track of his girl when they're chased by the police. He saves her by stepping out of an alley with his hands up, allowing her to stay hidden and escape later. He never sees her again, but after days of searching, he finds a tiny graffitied note that she left him. It says, "It's not your fault." This is exactly what Taeyoung needed to hear. The boy who felt helpless to save his family knows now that he mentored and protected someone else who had no family. This is a huge moment of growth for him. While Jimin is practicing with Hosik's girl, he accidentally collides with her and has a waking blackout when he sees his blood. He comes to himself at the sink, washing off the blood. and when he goes outside, he sees Hosek far down the street, rushing toward the hospital with the girl on his back. She's clearly unconscious. There's no way Jimin can catch up with him, and he's racked with guilt and fear because he hurt the girl. He tells himself he hasn't grown up at all since his experience at the Arboretum. But he didn't have an umbrella at the Arboretum, and now he has one. So whether he notices it or not, he has grown up a bit. He's learned to cope with trouble before it happens. Hosek, racing through the rain with the girl on his back, slips and injures his ankle, but he keeps going until they reach the hospital. While a doctor examines the girl, he stays in the waiting room and guards her belongings. Her purse spills out and he sees a plane ticket to the United States, indicating that she's received an invitation to study at a prestigious dance academy. Hosek is distressed at the thought of yet another mother figure leaving him, and when she comes out of the doctor's office saying she only has a mild concussion, he can't bring himself to congratulate her on the invitation. Now Namjoon doesn't just see his girl in the library. They also take the bus home, although her stop is farther down the line than his. Every day he sits in the back of the bus and watches her, trying to get up the nerve to introduce himself. Finally, he decides to connect with her by giving her a hair tie, since all she has at the moment is a rubber band. But in characteristic fashion for his character, he hesitates until it's too late. The girl falls asleep on the bus, and even though he knows she's going to miss her stop and have to walk home unless he wakes her up, he can't bring himself to speak. When his stop comes, he just slips by her and leaves the hair tie on top of her books. So far in this section, we've only covered the ideas behind Love Yourself Her and Love Yourself Tear. The most important lessons for the characters in the BU and for ARMYs who take BTS's messages to heart come from Love Yourself Answer. So before we get back to Seokjin's story, we need to talk about how some of his friends learned to love themselves. These events happen at various times before, during, and after the boys' experiences with the girls, and you can only find this material in HYYH The Notes, Book 1. Hosek's injury has worsened because he's refused the doctor's advice and hasn't given his ankle any rest. Instead, he's been continuing to work and to dance on it, and now he's in a cast. One night, hobbling along on his crutches, he passes a drunken Yoongi at a crosswalk. Hosek doesn't speak to him because Yoongi doesn't seem to notice him, and Hosek has problems of his own anyway. But when he looks back, he sees that Yoongi has now collapsed in the street. At that point, the sweet maternal Jung Hosek reaches his limit. He drops his usual cheerful mask and reveals a side of himself that he never shows the world. Yoongi certainly hasn't seen it. Hosek rages at him. When are you going to stop doing this? Do you think you're the only one going through tough times? Do you think I put on a smile in front of others because my life is all rosy and bright? Tell me, what are you so upset about? Everyone knows you're good at music, and they all willingly put up with you, even when you act up. Yes, you must have been in pain since your mother died, I know, but you can't go on like this forever. Aren't you going to make music? Can you live without it? Haven't you been happy even just once because of music? Why didn't you go see Jungkook? Don't you know what you mean to him? Don't you know what you mean to him? Don't you see we're all hurting too? Don't you see that? Yoongi isn't even the real source of Hosek's rage. He's angry with himself for getting injured, for being careless and not paying attention to each step. He's angry that when he tries to be helpful, it's because he worries about what others will think of him. And he reaches out first because he's afraid others won't reach out to him. Hosek doesn't want to be that person anymore. So he screams at Yoongi. Then he crutches away and leaves his friend lying in the street. Yoongi comes to himself on a mountain trail at a fork in the road. He can either go higher up the mountain or back down into the city. But as he puts it, I always took my chances at forks in the road. I had no destination. And so, directionless, he continues upward. Yoongi staggers through the forest, bitterly cold, achingly fatigued, with no idea of where he's going. He sinks to his knees. Suddenly he hears the faint sound of a piano, his first love, somewhere off in the darkness. It's playing a melody he'd forgotten, but one he's been chasing for years. He recognizes it instantly and pushes himself to his feet. He wants to follow it. For the first time in his life, Yoongi decides what to do when he reaches a crossroad. He decides to face the music, to fight the pain, the cold, the fear, the struggles, and to find the melody that has eluded him ever since he broke away from his friends. As his resolve hardens and his steps become firmer, the sound becomes more like emotion than music, and it brings with it every feeling he has tried to suppress: suffering, joy, hope, and fear. For the first time in years, Yoongi feels. He has never wanted fame or glory for his music, but he does want to finish this piece. And now he knows for sure that he wants to make music for the rest of his life. Yoongi follows the music for hours, and when it finally disappears, he finds himself back at the fork in the road where he'd chosen to climb the mountain. Now he chooses to go back to the city. He turns his feet toward the direction the sun rises. The next day, the epiphany Hosuk experienced with Yoongi leads him to his own crossroad. He can neither work nor dance on his injured ankle, but he has 3 weeks of sick leave and nothing to do, so he decides to ride a rocket, which is what he calls the train that goes to and from Songju. Hosuk buys a ticket to nowhere and gets off at the first stop that catches his attention, a small town called Hagok. He decides not to text his friends or check in on the group chat. He wants to find out what it means to be a different person in a different place, alone. So he goes to an auditorium where a dance company is preparing for a performance, and he sees a man practicing alone with more skill and emotion than Hosuk has ever witnessed. He's amazed. Then he's confused when the man doesn't appear on stage with the dance troupe that night. A few days later, Hosuk decides to move on, but he finds the dance group getting on the same train. He can't walk without crutches, but he can direct them in stowing their bags effectively. It doesn't hurt his ankle, and he enjoys being with them. In fact, he stays with them for a few stops, and eventually learns about the man he saw dancing alone in Hagok. It turns out that the man is the group's artistic director. Years ago, he was injured so badly that he can no longer perform, although he wants it more than anything. Hosuk manages to talk to him one night, and the man's words make a huge impression on him. He says he spent years in despair and frustration before making a comeback as a director and choreographer. He hit rock bottom before discovering his driving force, and Hosuk might have to do the same. But Hosuk already knows his driving force. It's dance. He doesn't care about fame or glory, and he doesn't have to wear a mask and pretend to be happy when he's dancing. When he dances, he just is happy. Back in high school, he and his friends couldn't stand the me in the mirror when they were alone. But when Hosuk dances, the me in the mirror is perfect. Hosuk's time alone has been healing, both mentally and physically, and now he's ready to return to Songju. As soon as he's home, Hosuk logs into the group chat and leaves a cheerful message saying he's back. Then he contacts Yoongi privately. Hosuk didn't need to hit his rock bottom, but he knows Yoongi might have hit his. To his surprise, Yoongi responds not with silence and not with words, but with a music file. It's the music that called him back from the mountain, the one he's been working on since high school. He's named it Hope. Hosuk faces his personal crossroads and finds his driving force, dance. He learns to love himself, by himself. And as a result, he's less fearful of abandonment. He realizes his dance partner doesn't look like his mother after all. And he's even able to congratulate her for her scholarship. Namjoon makes progress too, despite never really connecting with his girl. He continues to go to the library, reading everything he can get his hands on, while still working at the gas station at the same time. When he finally goes home to his container every night, he turns the light on outside. That way, any friends who might come by will know he's available for them. And Taehyung does come by one night because he's thinking about Namjoon, but he's reluctant to meet him, so when he sees the light, he just spends the night outside Namjoon's container. But Taehyung does have his own epiphany. It happens after the welcome back party for Jungkook, after he leaves the hospital at last. Taehyung goes home to find that his mother was there earlier. She talked to his sister and left a message saying that she wants to see Taehyung. His sister knows which part of town their mother lives in, and on the spur of the moment, Taehyung decides to find her and give her a piece of his mind. Jungkook is still with him and tags along despite his leg being weak. They walk until they're too hungry to go further, and then they visit a convenience store and order ramen. But when Taehyung goes back inside to get drinks, a drunk man in a khaki overcoat steals his food. The boys are too shocked to react until a group of young punks rolls up and starts beating the man up. Suddenly, Taehyung realizes that this man reminds him of his father, and he feels a surge of pity. He jumps into the fight, and he and Jungkook both receive a total thrashing. They can't walk any farther anyway because of Jungkook's leg, so they sit on a hill to watch the sunrise. It's enough. Taehyung has learned that he's not like his father, and that he can even sympathize with the old man. Both old men, really. He's beginning to love himself, and he can go home now. But his strange dreams continue. He stopped dreaming about his friend's death some time ago, but lately he's begun to dream about Seokjin, a girl with blood in her hair and blue flowers scattered across a busy street. And now, as we approach the end of August, we can finally get back to Seokjin and his plans for the firework festival. As a reminder, he found a florist who sells the girl's favorite flower, the rare blue smeraldo, and he's ordered a bouquet to give her on the day of the festival. He's also going to tell her he loves her. But does he, really? Seokjin's dream is to be a good person, and he thinks he can do that by making the girl happy. So just like the smeraldo flower, he leaves his truth untold. But the more he tries to fulfill her dreams, the farther he gets from his own, and the more he fears she'll see his real weaknesses. Seokjin isn't learning to love himself. Instead, he's wearing a mask to hide that self. When the date of the fireworks festival arrives, Seokjin waits eagerly at the crossroads where the girl is supposed to meet him. He has his bouquet ready, the bouquet of flowers whose meaning is the truth untold. But as he's standing there, he notices that the card is missing from the bouquet, so he calls for the florist. The man agrees to turn his truck around and head back to Seokjin's location. Just then, the girl arrives on the other side of the street. She smiles and waves to Seokjin, then begins to cross. The florist's truck is heading their way. The delivery truck came to a sudden stop after making a U-turn. Its headlights flashed. I stood there helplessly amidst the scenes of crashing, bouncing, and falling. I couldn't hear or feel anything for a moment. It was the summer, but the wind felt chilly. Then I heard something hitting and rolling on the road. The fragrance of flowers tickled my nose. I came back to reality. The bouquet of smeraldo flowers fell from my hand. She was lying in the middle of the road. Blood began to spread out from underneath her tousled hair. Dark red blood flowed down the road. With a loud pop, the first set of fireworks burst into the air on the night sky in the distance. Somewhere, I heard a mirror crack. Seokjin couldn't save his friends from everything. He couldn't even save himself. And when that mirror broke, all the growth and healing the others experienced in this loop was undone. But at the same time, a new loop has begun, and new problems come with it. Taeyong continues to have visions, but they've changed again. Now he dreams that Namjoon's container and the containers of other people who live around him are being attacked by masked thugs. They set the container homes on fire, and Namjoon dies in the blaze. The date of this catastrophe is September 30th. In the second half of our summary, we'll tell you the story of the little-known, much darker second book of HYYH The Notes, and Seokjin's friend's attempts to save him from the cat.